Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Welcome to the Olympic Minds Leadership Beyond Limits. This is for leaders who are the type of people who want to be the leader of leaders, the visionary of visionaries, the type of leaders who want to move from success to significance, who want to move from mediocrity to mastery, for the leaders who are not okay with just being average. So I'm your host, Sherry Winn, two-time Olympian, national championship basketball coach, executive leadership strategist. I own the Winning Leadership Company. So today I'm talking to David Griffith. And listen, you really want to listen to David because what he has is not theory. I can guarantee you it's not theory. It's grit tested, art proven, and results driven. Because he's had, I can't even count up the number of years that he has been a leader. I don't want to say he's old or anxious, but listen to this. He said 39 years at Modern Group, and before that 20 years at IBM, plus another company, which I forgot, sorry, David. And then he's had 10 years in a nonprofit. This guy has been a leader for decades, and he's certain to make sure that the information he shares with you today comes from this long career of leadership. So David, why don't you tell the folks a little bit more about you?
First of all, Sherry, just thank you for the invite. I'm honored to be on your podcast. So as you alluded, I've got a fair amount of scar tissue, and I kind of go by the theory that scar tissue is the best teacher, and you're really dumb if you get cut the same place twice. So, it's a long time. I've had a nice run. I continue to have a good run. I went to work for IBM right out of college. Moved up through the ranks there, became an executive there on the sales and marketing side. When IBM went through its time of transformation between whether they were going to be a hardware or software company, I moved over to MCI, ran their marketing on the business side. And then my wife and I had moved 12 times. We had 2 kids. We looked at each other and said, there's got to be a better way. We both went through recovery, just being very honest and transparent. And we moved to New Hope, Pennsylvania, where we've been for 35 years. And I bought into a business called Modern Group Limited. At that time, it was a small industrial holding company that her dad had founded. He needed somebody to come in and be a successor. And that worked out just terrifically well. And we wound up selling it to the employees in an ESOP. They asked me to stay on as chairman, so I'm still chairman of the company, still active. And at 60, I stepped down because I wanted to make room for the guys coming in back of me, and they really didn't want me down the hall from them, and I didn't want to be down the hall from them. And so I got called to run a nonprofit in Philly, Episcopal Community Services. At that time, it was a 147-year-old social service agency focused on the issues of poverty in Philadelphia and the 5-county area. That of all my career things has been the most rewarding by far, because I got a chance to take all the stuff I had learned and say, you know what, let's see if it works in a nonprofit. And so we might want to talk about that a little bit, because there's a lot of urban myths about nonprofits. The merger of business and nonprofit together creates a really powerful force for good. Retired there when I turned 70 because my wife made me. And it was time to hand the reins over. And I do a little bit of family business consulting now with a firm that I've been friends with for a long time. Do a fair amount of for-profit board work and a little bit of nonprofit work with some things and things that I care about.
That's what I said. Wow. Like, this is a guy that's lived, he's been, you started at the bottom. So this is the thing I want to talk to people about, because he started at the bottom. Like, you started as a newbie into a career. So you obviously didn't jump into a career and like, I'm the leader, listen to me. You jumped into a career, you had to learn. So what was it that took you into the leadership role? What do you think the characteristic was, or what do you think that the people above you saw in you that helped you start into that pathway?
great question. I've often wanted to ask them the same thing, and I know my wife absolutely wants to ask them. But
humor is humor for sure. You had humor.
Yeah, no. I was fortunate in IBM that I worked for a really strong branch manager. I switched from systems engineering to sales because we were getting married and the pay was better. And in I'm going to get this wrong, 77 or 78, I was the number one of 10 salesmen in the country that were ranked the highest, and won pretty nice recognition for that. Really wasn't fair because Jackie was in grad school, we were engaged, so I had to, I couldn't be out, being howling in the bars at night. So I was focused on selling and customers, and just circumstances worked out. I like to say, adjusted for inflation, I've never made what I made that year. So it was a really good year for a young guy. And what IBM does is, if you're really good at sales, they move you up. And looking back, about half the folks that do that go back into sales. And about half of us decide that, we're going to, play with managers. So I was on staff and then very quickly became a marketing manager in Pittsburgh with a small team. We did well. Went back on staff and became a branch manager up in Bethlehem, PA. And I took over a branch that was 160 out of 158. We had a branch that closed we couldn't even beat. 2 years later, we were the third in the country.
So I want to stop you there, because there's something that you had, right, David, that number one, you went from engineering, right, into sales. And then you moved up that sales ladder, right, incredibly. And then you were able to later take a branch and move it up to third. So tell me, what is that characteristic? What is that thing that allowed you to do that? Because people often will talk about like it's just luck. Well, it's not luck.
No. My dad, when I became a manager for the first time, I'll remember this, and it's the name of my blog, actually, Wear Muddy Boots. But my dad, I called him my first day on the job. I called Dad and I said, "Hey, Dad, guess what? I think I was 28 or 29. I said, "Guess what? I'm a manager." And he said, "That's terrific." He said, "Stand up." And with my dad, you stood up. He said, "Look down. What shoes are you wearing?" I said, "Dad, I'm at IBM. I got my black wingtips on. What do you think?" He said, "Wrong answer." He said, "You need to be wearing muddy boots." And I said, "Dad, you got to help me here." And he said, "No, you go out into the field, you get your boots muddy, and you talk to customers, you talk to your people, and you ask two questions. How are we doing? And how are you doing?" Basically in a combined question. And then very simply you say, "What can we do better?" And then you shut up and you listen.
Wow.
And that became a seminal lesson that, all too often leaders think they know all the answers. And frankly, the people closest to the work know the most about the work.
For sure.
And, his second lesson was, if you can find a customer's pain and fix it, they'll do business with you forever. And that's not necessarily product. It might be a favor, it might be services and going through. And then the third lesson, and this came from experiences in college and athletics, it's all about talent. And so a large part of a leader, I'm convinced, is to be a coach, area real well. And you go get the best draft choices, you partner with them. Officers eat last seems to be the buzzword these days, but I think it's really true. And that kind of launched my career. And, I went from being a branch manager to a regional manager, and then I was administrative assistant to the president. And, IBM was going through a lot at the time, and, there was an opportunity to do something else. They offered a RIF. You had to be an idiot not to take it. So I left on a Friday, and on a Monday I went to work for MCI as the VP of marketing. And, and I just kept re-employing that. And, my favorite title of all the titles I've had at ECS was head coach.
Oh,
I didn't want to be executive director. I didn't want to be a CEO. And our whole methodology for helping people move was coaching them.
Yep.
And so it just tied in. It was one of the big guy upstairs was kind of looking over my shoulder and saying, dude, go be smart on this.
Well, I love that whole idea of the muddy boots. I mean, the muddy boots, the image, the idea of not separating yourself, but being down with your people, not down, being across from your people, being with your people, asking them the good questions. I just got off a call with one of my coaching clients, and I'm not going to tell you what company she works for, obviously, but she was saying, there was a time when she worked for this company, she really loved the company because they listened and they asked questions and they wanted to know. And now she says, they don't ask the questions. They don't listen to us. They don't want to know what we know. And she goes, I don't want to be here anymore because the culture changed, and it changed for, in her opinion, which I agree, the worst because people aren't going to willing, as you would say, to wear the muddy boots.
Well, it's just, you think about it, it's fundamental, but it's easy to say, hard to do. When you were coaching, the games were the easy part. It was the practice that was brutal. And, you got to practice and you got to listen. And if you think about it, if you hire really good talent and you don't listen to them, you've got a real expensive payroll that's going to be just biding time looking for another job.
For sure.
Whereas if when I took over ECS, our talent was not great. My wife's a psychiatric social worker, so she was my secret weapon. I'll never forget when I came home and told her I was going to go work in an anti-poverty agency. And she gave me one of those classic looks. She's got her doctorate in social work. She goes, what the hell do you know? And I said, well, I got you. And I said, so I asked her, I said, where's the talent? And it's in grads that are 5 to 7 year out. Social workers are predominantly female. And she gave me the insight that, look, a lot of them are going to be first-time moms. And juggling a social work career and a new mom is going to be really hard. So I went back to the board and said, look, I'm going to go on hiring the team, but we're going to have a daycare center and a nursery in the at work. And we're going to make it really, really easy for people to be moms. And I went out and I got phenomenal talent. And one of the smartest hires I ever did was a woman by the name of Lindsay Albright. I can mention her name here because I'm fiercely proud of her. She fit that bill. She was looking to volunteer when she came in to see me. And 2 interviews later, I hired her. She made a leap because of what I described. And and we just repeated that multiple times. And then we turned them loose. And I said, Linz, look, you're the social worker. We got to get out of the maintenance business. My only rule to her was I said, look, a lot of people maintain people. We got to get in the transformation business. Go figure out, go do the research, and let's find, the best way to do transformation. Mm-hmm. And she went out, did the research, and came back, said, hey, there's an outfit in Boston. They have a brain science-based coaching model. And it's tremendously effective. So we dug into it. And at the end of the day, that's what we adopted. And we created a program called Mindset that
I love it.
And there's a lot of attributes there. But and we just kept building the team.
Yeah.
And it was just a lot of fun. Good people getting a seat at the table. My rule as a manager was if it went bad, it was mine. If it went well, it was theirs.
Absolutely. So there's 3 things you just mentioned that I want to kind of let people hear. One is the partnership with your wife. So the partnership with your wife, and you've mentioned your wife several times already. So there was a partnership there that it sounds like was really cultivated that enabled you to be successful. So can you talk a little bit more about that? Because it's a lot of people, I think they sacrifice their relationships for their job, but it sounds like that it was a partnership with you guys.
Well, we were on that track to sacrifice, and we had moved 11 times. She had a great job in Philadelphia, phenomenal job in Pittsburgh. Every 11 to 15 months, we would move because I was moving up the ladder, and ego was a little bigger than it should have been. And at one point, we both recognized that things had to come to an end. We had two small kids. We had alcoholism in both our families. And we both said, you know what, we got to get sober. We got to put down roots, and we got to raise our kids. Mm-hmm. And I, at MCI at the time where I was, at IBM, I had a really good package. Mm-hmm. MCI, the chairman died, and it triggered a second package. And so all of a sudden I'm sitting on some capital that allowed me to buy into the business. Mm-hmm. And we looked at each other and said, let's go for it. I took a huge pay cut, but we moved here, and we live in a community we love, lots of friends, and our church. And we got to grow. I got to grow that business, which was her dad's business. Mm-hmm. That carried some baggage, to be honest.
Yep.
But it was about just, saying, we want to be married, and we just, neither of us were happy doing it. I have no doubt I could have been one of the senior guys at IBM. 3 or 4 of my friends got there. We were all together.
Right.
But, I was burning the candle at both ends. I'm not sure I would have made it.
Right.
So sometimes, God tells you, take a left, and you take that left.
Yep. So the second thing, because there's 3 things I want to talk about that you had mentioned, and I'm going to go back the alcoholism and the 2 of you getting through that. But you said, the other thing you said to me that I thought was really amazing is you went and discovered what these people needed, like the young moms that you were hiring, what they needed, and you gave it to them. So that they could come and be successful, you said, look, let's give them a place to put their kids. Let's give them a daycare center. Let's give them an opportunity where the thing that they value, like that's a huge value, because when you're a mom, your children are number one, basically. Your spouse, your children, maybe your children, your spouse, whatever that is, but it's pretty big. And you said, let's figure this out, what they really need. Let's help them be successful. I think that if all leaders did that, wow.
Well, let me be clear. It wasn't the daycare per se. They could bring their kids to work, and if they had a nanny and they were nursing. So it wasn't the traditional daycare, because that had licensure problem. We probably went right up to the edge on licensure, but it wasn't unusual for me to have, one of the Bambinos on my shoulder walking them. I became a rent-a-grandpa. It was great. And, it's just, look, in nonprofit social work, you become family. Because think about it, there is no good news every day. There is good news that comes, but it's way disproportional to the crisis that people you're serving are going through. You got to be strong, and you got to be resilient, and you got to be supported to do that work. I could do that with my eyes closed. I couldn't do what they did with the clients. I wasn't trained.
Right.
And I wasn't going to kid myself that I could do it. There's a lot of urban myths that I had a senior social worker sit me down about 6 months in and said, look, asshole, come here. Shut the door on me and says, you just gave that guy the worst advice. He doesn't have a car. He doesn't have a license. He's living in a shelter, and you're telling him to go back to school and get training. He didn't have a dime to know how to do that. And you're sitting here as an old white guy giving him advice to one of your marketing reps. And you got your head. I'm not going to use the language, but her point was, and B. Fulton is her name. She's one of the best senior social workers, period. And she just felt very comfortable just, giving me the feedback. And so I stopped back and I said, okay. I affirmed that conversation with my wife, and she said, yeah, you are. But, what I learned is just go hire more Bs and let them design the programs, give them the space, give them the board cover, and let's roll the dice. And it worked. Mm-hmm. 'We created a program that's demonstrated to be highly effective. And, in partnership with the folks in Boston, it's now been rolled out to about 130, 140 agencies.
Wow.
And it's designed to coach people to where they are, to a job at a living wage with benefits and assets in the bank. And data will tell you, data is the other big part of this, but data will tell you if you can get an individual to that with assets in the bank so they don't have a reset, you can break the cycle.
Wow.
And
how beautiful is that? I mean, how beautiful. I can't even, like, we sell people short, I think, a lot because we don't give them what they really need to get to where they need to go, right?
Well, and we have a lot of urban myths about poverty. Nobody wants to be in poverty. Most folks are working 3 jobs, but it's at minimum wage or below.
Right.
And if you got to go back for school, if you got, little kids, what do you do? And you just, if you can create that ecosystem that supports them, they'll run hard. Yeah. And I've seen it, not everybody, but way better. Our efficacy rate is somewhere in the 80%. Traditional methodology is in the 30s.
Wow. So let me go back to this mindset. You said, look, I think Lindsay, was it Lindsay that you said did the research? So did the research and you came up with this coaching methodology that was called mindset that you guys used. So tell us about that.
There was other people besides Lindsay, if this is getting listened to. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah, there was Mary Alice and a number of other folks, but I just want to give credit where credit's due. Absolutely.
No, I would agree with you 100%. So you came back and you said, look, this is going to work. So what was it about the coaching method that worked so well that other people listening could duplicate?
You met people. Well, the first rule is you don't tell people what they need. You ask them. It's muddy boots for social work. And that made a lot of sense to me. Second, we had a beta up in Boston with an organization up there that was doing some of the early research. What we added to it was a savings match, because what we noticed that you could get a job, you could get housed, but if you had a catastrophe and it drained you of savings, the slippery slope was there pretty quick. We also noticed there were some rules that were just dumb public policy. So we created a small advocacy group that would go with our state senate and that area in PA. The big one was cliff benefits. If you were a mom and you took a job if you were at $26,999, you got $4,000 for childcare. If you went $1 over that, you lost it 100%. So it was a cliff. Well, that's just dumbass public policy, because people are gonna, are you gonna take that raise, or are you gonna,
Right.
And so it's the system trying to do the right thing, but doing it wrong.
Right.
So we were able in Pennsylvania to lobby, and along with a lot of partners, get that law changed. So you had to look at this thing holistically with your people. Advocacy on the rules, listening to people rather than telling them, setting goals, and then helping them. The whole theory of mindset is when the brain's in deep crisis, it can't problem solve.
No, of course not.
That's a neurological fact.
Right.
If you can lower crisis, what they discovered up in Boston was, if I can lower crisis, your problem-solving skill improves. Mm-hmm. And by achieving small goals and getting on that flywheel, you get moving. So Mindset's a 5-year program. A lot of people gave me a hard time, said that's a long time for a program. I said, well, how much do you spend on your kids? And it gets kind of quiet, and off you go. So yeah, I'm obviously fiercely proud of that work, but I'm fiercely proud of what the team did. Mm-hmm. And we're still in that implementation phase.
Wow. I think that the things you said make so much sense. I've never met a person that wanted to suck. I never met a person who wanted to be poor. I never met a person who wanted to be dumb, right? That's just not, it's what we think because they haven't gotten it, haven't gotten to success yet, or whatever we want to call success. They haven't been able to get to that level. And you're right, it takes time. Because they were brainwashed into believing what they believed.
But here's the other magic moment. I'm a business guy. I team up with a social work team. We build a social work team. While they're doing the social work stuff, I'm fixing finance. I'm fixing development. I'm rebuilding a board. I'm being active in the community to drive partnerships. Mm-hmm. And so by having a good team doing the work, and my job was to go back to my IBM days, put my sales hat on and go raise, several $1 million to grow the endowment.
Right.
And, I know how to sell. And, a lot of my social workers were very uncomfortable asking people for the order. Development's not their deal. So the beauty, I think, of this and the future for a lot of retired execs is they ought to get their butt into working with a nonprofit and merge the nonprofit skills and the business skills and the coaching skills. And, it's about building a team with, when you were coaching basketball, you didn't want all guards.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So, you need, and I'm a huge proponent of experienced business folks giving back. And I've had a lot of people call me and say, hey, talk to me about how I do this.
Well, that's something that people should hear right now is that there's always information, people willing to support you if you'll ask, I think, number one. And then you got to be ready to listen, number two. David, I'm in awe because I love the fact that you were able to blend the two models and the success rate has been incredibly high for you, which means that people have opportunity. Like, we don't have to look at a person and then write them off. Right? We don't need to write anybody off. We need to give them opportunities. Now, some people will write themselves off.
No. If
that's going to happen.
Yeah, there's no question there's mental health and addiction issues. And those are different battles, different issues, and they're not insignificant. But, for the 75% of the population in Philly that was in poverty that wasn't in that category, this was absolutely a model we believed worked. And the issue is, you can maintain people or you can transform them. And our fundamental belief was we need to be in the transformation given business.
I love what you just said, and I want to repeat that for people because you just said you can maintain people or you can transform them. I think that's a huge, huge concept that people need to understand. Like, you can maintain or you can transform. I mean, what a beautiful concept, and to choose transformation.
Well, and having the board that was willing to back, having donors and foundations. My job was to go out, put on my old salesman hat, tell that story and explain the why. Mm-hmm. And let the team I had hired go figure out, okay, how do we measure it? How do we do the IT in back of it? What are the right programs? Mm-hmm. What are the grants and funding mechanisms that we need? And, it's all about talent. You got to build a team that loves that vision. I had to say goodbye to some folks because they didn't. And, the other secret sauce is that the nonprofits have this gift of what they call interns. So all the social work schools require X number of hours. Yeah. So I would, have a relationship with Bryn Mawr, with Penn, with a number of the other schools. And my deal was, if you busted your butt, we'd hire you. And if I didn't have an opening, I would help you get a job with, somewhere else. Mm-hmm. But if you didn't bust your butt, it wasn't going to work. Yeah. And some of our best hires came through that program. And, you think about it, it's a 6-month interview.
Nice.
And it's great because, they're learning, you're observing. And if you make a hire decision, the odds go up dramatically better that you know what you get. So, I wish business had a stronger intern program that they're doing now, but
right. It gives you an opportunity to really learn the person. And so you said it's about talent, And I would agree 100%. And part of that talent is not just their talent, but their ability to like their attitude, their coachability, their willingness to listen, their willingness to take the input that you're giving them and to do something with it. So when I interviewed people for my next book, which is coming out this month, Winning Business Secrets, I asked people about, how do you hire a high performer? And 90% of the people said, look, it's not about talent alone. Or they included as talent that ability to the attitude that somebody had, that coachability that they had. They were really looking at those pieces as part of talent, right? Or as separate from talent, but part of the total package.
Well, let me tell you a story about interviewing, if you want to go there for a second.
Love it. Absolutely.
So, hang on. You know what these are?
Suspenders? No. Oh, no. Those are those. Exercise bands. Sure.
So, these are Marine exercise bands from the 1940s. When I interviewed at IBM for the first time, I interviewed with a guy by the name of Monty Montgomery. God rest his soul. And he was the kind of guy that Tom Brokaw wrote about. Grew up in Nebraska, farmer's kid, went and played sports, went in the Army, the Marine Corps, became I'm not sure of the service. I'm embarrassed I don't know that answer. But became a pilot, flew in Korea, the whole deal there. Came back, joined IBM, and moved up through the ranks. And he was a branch manager when he interviewed me. So I go into the office, wet ears out of college, and we have I think a really good interview. He's sitting in the back of his desk, his legs up, and the whole interview he is pulling these things apart, just kind of quietly doing it. And towards the end of the interview, he throws them in his desk. And, we're wrapping up, and he says one more thing, and he tosses me these things. It says, can you do that? And, I'm a lacrosse player. I mean, I'm, in relatively good shape. Of course I can do it. I can't move those things an inch. I cannot move it an inch. And about 30 seconds in, I said, look, am I missing something here? And he said, no, interview's over. And I'm going, well, this is the most screwed up thing I've been through. 2 days later, I get hired. And I get hired. He was the one branch manager. I get to another branch office, New York manufacturing. Go forward almost 30 years. I'm in church here in Trinity Soulbury. And Monty, I'm in the pew, and all of a sudden this hand comes on my shoulder and says, Dave, what are you doing here? And it's Monty. I haven't seen him, on and off I had seen him. And turns out he had retired, moved to the New Hope Soulbury area. And we reacquainted. He and his wife, introduced us to everybody. We had a great time. And finally, one night at dinner, I'm saying, Monty, I got to ask. He said, what was the deal with this? And he says, oh, well, I had two sets. I had one that was elastic, and I had one that was made out of stuff that you couldn't have moved it with a tow truck. And we wanted to see how people reacted.
Oh, wow.
And I said, okay, but Monty, what were you looking for? He said, I didn't want to see people who got mad. I wanted somebody who, did exactly what you did and says, what am I missing? And I want you to think about that. Because if you're building a team and you're running into adversity and you can't handle it, what do you want them to do? You want them to be comfortable coming to ask for help. And it just, boom. Now here's the tearjerker part of this. Go forward another 5 years. He's dying of cancer. I go to visit him. We had become very close friends. His wife, my wife, everybody. He was obviously much older than I was, and he passes. And I go to the funeral. All that. About 4 days later, these show up in the mail with a note that says, "Keep pulling."
Oh my goodness!
You think he was a mentor?
Wow! Oh, I love that story. That gave me chills, and I hope that people are listening that also gave you chills, because
he was an extraordinary leader.
Yeah.
And just made out of the right stuff and was willing to teach the right stuff. And,
I love the story. I just love the story because it was such a, hand you over these things, and he's just been like, it's been so easy. And then you get...
Oh yeah, no, you get set up, but you think about what they were looking was for the attributors where you're willing to ask, what am I missing?
Right.
As opposed to try and bull your way through it. Right. And to me, I just thought that was, an attribute that was well worth remembering when you're hired.
Absolutely.
As a leader, you want people to come and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. How do you create that environment so it's safe? We call it, how you make it safe to name the elephant. And I've seen a lot of shops where that gets taught. You see these little stuffed elephants all over the place. If you grab the elephant, somebody's, going to say something uncomfortable. The person who taught me that said, look, that's particularly important if you're the elephant, or your people willing to give you, tough feedback.
Absolutely.
And
well,
so
I think that's one of the things about being an Olympic level leader is that you're willing to, and you want people to challenge you. So you're willing to listen to their challenges without making excuses, and you're willing to you're providing the environment where people can question you, question each other, because that's where true growth happens.
Or say, the one that I particularly says, Dave, they'll come in and say, Dave, look, I hear what you're saying, I just don't understand it. And can you help me understand the why? Mm-hmm. And the other great lesson I would tell you is you and I disagree. Mm-hmm. And, it gets a little heated. And, the best lesson I've learned is, hey, let's you and I sit down. Here's the data I'm seeing on this decision. What do you see different in the data that I don't? And that's not challenging your beliefs. It's not challenging your assumption. Right. But, 99% of our decisions need to have some data in back of them. And in my experience, a lot of times we're either looking at different data or we've made different assumptions, or you're going to learn something that you missed, or they're going to learn something they missed. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times that's been the real relief valve on some of the tough issues that we've gone through. And, I see it with sales process, no, he'll never buy it. Well, we asked him. Well, no. Well, how do we know that? Well, I just know him. Well, let's go ask him, and it's, bring me along and let me be the jerk, which I do really well. So it's anyway.
So I want to go back to, you were making mention about your alcoholism, both you and your wife. And so many people never get through that, David. I mean, many people, I had a friend once who I admired to the maximum. She was an incredible athlete. I had admired her since I was a kid. She was a national championship volleyball player. She became a head coach at a really prestigious university, and she battled alcoholism and she didn't win, right? So you and your wife both made a decision. Now this is I think the crux of the beginning of it. You made a decision like this wasn't working, and then you went to go do something about it. So can you tell people a little bit more about that? Because what I think happens, David, is that so many of us believe that it's a golden path and it's just so easy for people to get to where you got and to do what you've done. So tell people a little bit more about that journey.
Well, one of the reasons I'm so public about it is that, and Jackie and I are both, I'm probably more public about it than she is, but it runs in both our families. It's clearly a genetic disease, and if you go in for any kind of treatment, they'll do a family map, and there's no question it's genetic. And so it ran on both sides. And again, we had moved 11 times. We had 2 small kids. And she came to me. I had taken the job at MCI, and we were living in Newtown, Connecticut. And she said, Dave, look, I got to check myself in. I was totally sportive about it, but I was starting a new job. Ian wasn't born yet. Well, maybe he was. And so she went into treatment, 30-day rehab. And part of that was a 4-day family session. And so I went, and, you give your family history, you kind of talk about it. And the doctor said, look, yeah, you probably are right on the edge. And I was way over the edge. I just wasn't given all the facts.
Right.
And he said, it'd probably be a pretty good idea that you quit. And look, I love my wife, and I'm going to do whatever I got to do to make it safe. But I also, looking back, I clearly had an issue as well. And so, Ian was born because he was little. So it was October 26, 1991. I quit.
Wow.
And neither her nor I have had a relapse. And that's very unusual. But I think part of the reason is that our family supported us, and we supported each other. And we had 2 little kids that we adore. I'm very open about talking about it. And I bet you I've brought probably 100 people to either treatment or their first AA meeting. It's much more prevalent than people really want to talk about. Mm-hmm. And it's an inherited disease. It's not a character failure.
Right.
Which is the way a lot of us treat it, right? We treat character failure as an excuse for a lot of things.
Yeah, we do.
And, we had a church that supported us. We had a neighborhood that supported us, the power of community. I think leaders got to create community sometimes. Sometimes it's got to be a community of one.
Yeah.
And it's, I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed of it either. And it's if you can help a couple of people on the journey, mm-hmm. then, because you're vulnerable, then damn it, we ought to be vulnerable.
Absolutely. I was lucky because my alcoholism doesn't run in my family. But I used alcohol for a while as a medicator, right? Just trying to get through what I got through because I didn't have any other tool set. And like I said, I was lucky. I was lucky, David, because it didn't run in my family. I was lucky that that I was able to, recognize by myself and really stop being crazy about it, because I'd just drink until I pass out. Like, that was not a good answer to anything. That wasn't, and it didn't change anything the next morning either. Like, you woke up, I'm still me.
Yeah, and you also had a wicked headache. And the joke we used to say in the fraternity house is, why did they have metal chairs in the shower? And it said so you could sit down and just let the hot water run over your head for an hour. And I mean, when I think about that, culturally something was really screwed up. But
that was
it. Anyway, look, it's part of your history, part of my history, and you move on, and what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So
well, you're in the position of learning and willing to change. And I think that's what you did, David. This has been incredible. You've given so many insights. I just, man, wow. So is there one thing that we haven't talked about that you want to share with the audience today? What would you like to tell them that we haven't shared yet?
On the subject of leadership?
It can be leadership. It can be, personal growth, whatever it is that your heart is telling you to talk about right now.
What I wish for folks is that we all recognize the importance of we versus me. I see it in society right now in a major way. There's a lot of me going on. Right. I'm not going to get into current politics or anything like that, but I think we have, what makes us great as a nation is our ability to have compassion for people. And, we are a nation of a lot of different kinds of folks.
Right.
And I think that's what makes us incredibly strong. And, my commitment as a leader is the we and to give back. Right. People say, well, why aren't you fully retired and, go play golf or go fish? And, well, that's interesting, but, why I still got whatever I got, that's kind of where I'm committed to. And I just really challenge people to think about that and act on it. And I'll also tell you that faith is something that's incredibly important to me. And I don't preach, I don't, require, but I found an awful lot of strength in that community. And
so, yeah, I love the two things you just said. Is there a way that if people, I think you have the Muddy Boots blog, do you want to share with people a little bit about the blog? How can they find the blog, or how they can connect with you a little bit more?
Yeah, Muddy Boots is the muddybootsblog.com. And it is written when I feel like it or motivated. The most recent one was written when I was recovering in the hospital the last couple of weeks ago. And it's built up a nice following. It might be about the dog one week. It might be about leadership. It might be about things that are going on. I started writing it when I took over the nonprofit to talk about my journey from, being an old white guy with a business background, running a nonprofit, and why poverty was not the urban myth that I thought it was. And the Muddy Boots is obviously a tribute to my dad, because how you doing and what can we do better is the essence of, a lot of solutions to a lot of things.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of what I would share.
Thank you so much. This has been enlightening. It's been authentic. It's been, I think, heart-rendering. I think it's really one of those things that, folks, if you're listening right now, this is the kind of leader to aspire to be. This is the kind of leader that truly makes a difference. And like David said, you don't want to maintain, but you want to transform. So thank all of you for joining us today. Subscribe, share, and we'll see you the next time. Have a winning day. Bye now.